Today on Save Point, we have over an hour of nostalgic video games to talk about. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. When Super Mario 64 was released in 1996 as a launch title for the Nintendo 64, it revolutionized the gaming industry. As Mario's first foray into the world of 3D, this game not only set the standard for 3D platformers, but also helped to shape the future of game design. It was developed by Nintendo EAD, under the direction of the legendary Shigeru Miyamoto, and was considered one of the most innovative titles of its time. The development of Super Mario 64 began in 1994, around 2 years before the official launch of the Nintendo 64. The team, led by Shigeru Miyamoto, aimed to create a 3D world that would capture the essence of the classic Mario formula, while taking advantage of the power offered by the new console. This transition from 2D to 3D was no small feat, and the development team had to overcome several technical challenges to create a seamless experience. One of the key struggles was mastering the 3D camera. Since most platformers up to this point were 2D, the idea of navigating a fully 3D environment was still uncharted territory for developers. The camera had to be fluid yet responsive, allowing players to explore without feeling restricted. Nintendo tackled this by introducing the Lakitu camera system, where a cameraman, the character Lakitu, followed Mario throughout the levels. This innovation set the standard for 3D games to come, but it took countless iterations to get it right. Another challenge was adapting Mario's movements to a 3D space. The development team focused heavily on making Mario's movements feel precise and responsive, with a variety of jumps, flips, and dives that allowed for full exploration of the game's open world. The analog stick of the Nintendo 64 controller became a crucial tool for this, as it allowed for variable running speeds and a greater sense of control than traditional digital inputs. When Super Mario 64 launched alongside the Nintendo 64, it was an instant commercial success. The game sold over 11 million copies worldwide, becoming the best-selling game for the console. Its appeal stretched across a broad audience, from longtime Mario fans to those eager to experience the new possibilities of 3D gaming. Critically as well, Super Mario 64 was a smash hit. Reviewers praised the game for its groundbreaking use of 3D environments, intuitive controls, and open-world level design. Many gaming magazines and websites gave it a near-perfect score, and it quickly became a benchmark for future 3D platformers. Players were equally enthusiastic, with the game becoming a beloved part of childhood memories for millions. The story of Super Mario 64 sticks to the traditional formula of the Mario series. Princess Peach invites Mario to her castle to enjoy a cake she baked, but when Mario arrives, he discovers that Bowser has kidnapped her once again. This time, Bowser has also seized control of the castle using the Power Stars to trap Peach and her guards inside the castle walls. To rescue Princess Peach, Mario must collect Power Stars hidden throughout various paintings that serve as a portal to different worlds. Each world contains a series of challenges, including races, boss battles, and puzzles. As Mario collects more stars, he gains access to new areas of the castle, eventually facing Bowser in 3 major showdowns. While the plot is simple, it provides the perfect backdrop for the game's focus on exploration and gameplay. One of the defining features of Super Mario 64 is its non-linear level design. Unlike many platformers of the time, Super Mario 64 encourages players to explore its open environments at their own pace. Each level is a self-contained world filled with secrets, hidden areas, and multiple objectives. Instead of following a strict path from start to finish, players can revisit levels to uncover new challenges and tackle them in a different order. The art style of Super Mario 64 is colorful and vibrant, with each world feeling distinct and full of character. From the lush green hills of Bob-omb Battlefield to the fiery depths of Lethal Lava Land, each level has its own unique theme and aesthetic. While the graphics may look dated by modern standards, they were groundbreaking at the time and helped immerse players in Mario's expansive 3D world. The game's hub world, Princess Peach's castle, also plays an important role in the level design. It serves as a gateway to the game's various worlds, with each painting or portal representing a different environment. This hub-based structure was a novel approach for the time, giving players a sense of freedom and control over how they progress through the game. Super Mario 64 has left an undeniable mark on the gaming industry. Its innovative camera system, fluid controls, and open-ended level design became the blueprint for future 3D platformers. Many elements introduced in Super Mario 64, such as the concept of a hub world, collectible objectives, and Mario's acrobatic movement, were expanded upon in later games like Super Mario Galaxy and even Super Mario Odyssey. The game is often cited as one of the greatest video games of all time, if not the best video game of all time, and its influence can be seen in a wide range of modern titles. Super Mario 64 remains a nostalgic favorite for countless players who experienced it during their childhood. When The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time was released in 1998 for the Nintendo 64, it was a groundbreaking moment in gaming history. Often hailed as one of the greatest video games of all time, Ocarina of Time was a revolutionary leap from 2D to 3D for the Zelda series, similar to Mario 64 going from 2D to 3D, and its impact on the gaming industry is still felt today. The game was directed by Shigeru Miyamoto, Eiji Aonuma, and Yoshiaki Koizumi, all taking key roles in development. Development for Ocarina of Time began in 1995, shortly after the completion of Super Mario 64. The transition from the 2D worlds of previous Zelda games, like A Link to the Past, into full fully realize 3D environments was a major challenge. The team had to rethink many aspects of how the Zelda formula would work in 3D, from combat to puzzle solving. One of the biggest hurdles was figuring out how players would interact with a 3D space, particularly during combat. This led to the creation of the Z targeting system, a now iconic mechanic that allows players to lock onto enemies and objects, simplifying movement and attacks in 3D. This innovation was crucial in making combat feel intuitive and manageable in a 3D environment. Another challenge was the scale and ambition of the world Nintendo wanted to create. The game featured a vast open world that would allow players to travel between different regions, dungeons, and towns. Creating this would require Nintendo to push the hardware limits of the Nintendo 64. The development team even considered using the Nintendo 64 DD to accommodate the game's size. When Ocarina of Time was released in November 1998, it was met with universal acclaim. Critics praised the game for its breathtaking 3D world, innovative gameplay mechanics, and its blend of action, adventure, and puzzle solving. The game was awarded perfect scores by many major gaming publications, and it went on to win numerous Game of the Year awards, and it's still frequently cited in discussions of the greatest video games ever made. And in terms of sales, Ocarina of Time was a massive success. It sold over 7 million copies worldwide, making it one of the best-selling games for the Nintendo 64. Its influence extended beyond sales figures, as it became a cultural touchstone for gamers around the world, introducing many to the Zelda franchise for the very first time. Players were blown away by the game's epic scale, storytelling, and sense of adventure. The game's dungeons, bosses, and side quests became legendary, with players spending countless hours exploring the vast world of Hyrule. Many finally remember their first time pulling the Master Sword from its pedestal, traveling through time, or facing off against Ganon in the game's climactic finale. Ocarina of Time tells the story of Link, a young boy raised in the Kokiri Forest, who is chosen by destiny to stop the evil sorcerer Ganondorf from taking over the land of Hyrule. The game begins with Link being summoned by the Great Deku Tree, who instructs him to seek out Princess Zelda. Together, they devise a plan to stop Ganondorf from obtaining the Triforce, a powerful artifact that grants its holder ultimate power. However, things don't go as planned. After pulling the Master Sword from the Temple of Time, Link is sealed away for 7 years, emerging as an adult to find that Hyrule has fallen under Ganondorf's control. The game's narrative is centered around Link traveling through time, gathering the power of the sages, and eventually confronting Ganondorf to save both Princess Zelda and the world. The storytelling in Ocarina of Time was groundbreaking at the time, with cinematic cutscenes, rich character development, and an epic scope. Link's journey from child to adult, his friendship with characters like Zelda, and the looming threat of Ganondorf created a narrative that resonated deeply with players. Ocarina of Time's world design is one of its greatest achievements. The game's version of Hyrule is vast, filled with diverse locations, such as lush forests, vast deserts, volcanic mountains, and serene lakes. Each region feels distinct, with its own atmosphere. From the eerie dungeons like the Forest Temple to the fiery depths of Death Mountain's Fire Temple, each environment is carefully crafted with unique puzzles and boss fights. The game's open world structure was revolutionary at the time. Players felt that they could freely explore Hyrule, discovering secrets, side quests, and hidden areas at their own pace. This sense of freedom was a major departure from the more linear design of previous Zelda games, and helped cement Ocarina of Time as a trailblazer for open world game design. In terms of art style, Ocarina of Time embraced a more realistic look. The game's use of 3D graphics brought the world of Hyrule to life in a way that had never been seen before. The character models, environments, and visual effects were groundbreaking for their time, and the game's visual design has remained iconic. The music of Ocarina of Time also plays a crucial role in setting the tone and atmosphere. Composed by Koji Kondo, the game's soundtrack features some of the most memorable music in video game history, including tracks like Zelda's Lullaby, Saria's Song, and Gerudo Valley. The use of the ocarina as a central gameplay mechanic where players learn songs that influence the game world added another layer of depth to both the gameplay and storytelling. During development, a project known as Ora Zelda was planned for release on the Nintendo 64 DD, a disc drive add-on that allowed for expanded content and save data. Ora Zelda was intended to enhance Ocarina of Time by offering new puzzles, altered dungeons, and additional challenges for experienced players. The Nintendo 64 DD itself, however, was a commercial failure in Japan, and it was never released in other regions. As a result, Ora Zelda was cancelled, leaving fans wondering what could have been. Though Ora Zelda was scrapped, the concept was eventually revived years later in the form of the Master Quest, which was included as a bonus in the Ocarina of Time release for the GameCube. Master Quest offered a harder version of Ocarina of Time, with some reworked dungeons and tougher puzzles, and the overall game being mirrored, giving longtime fans the chance to experience the classic game in a new and more challenging way. While Ora Zelda never came to fruition as originally intended, Master Quest became sort of a spiritual successor, allowing the original vision for an expanded version of Ocarina of Time to live on. The impact of Ocarina of Time cannot be overstated. It not only set the gold standard for 3D adventure games, but also influenced countless titles across different genres. The game's use of a lock-on targeting system, open-world exploration, and innovative dungeon design have all become staples of modern game development. Ocarina of Time has been re-released on multiple platforms, including the Nintendo 3DS, where it was remastered and updated. Its influence can still be seen in modern Zelda titles, like Breath of the Wild, which takes many of the concepts introduced in Ocarina of Time and expands upon them in a fully open world setting. For many, Ocarina of Time is the quintessential example of what video games can achieve as a medium. Its combination of innovative gameplay, epic storytelling, and timeless design continues to inspire both players and developers alike, making it one of the most nostalgic and beloved games of all time. When Final Fantasy VII was released for the PlayStation in 1997, it forever changed the landscape of RPGs and cemented itself as one of the most influential and beloved video games of all time. Developed by Square, now known as Square Enix, Final Fantasy VII brought cinematic storytelling, deep character development, and cutting-edge 3D graphics to the forefront, introducing millions of players to the world of Japanese role-playing games. The game's iconic characters, unforgettable story, and groundbreaking visuals made it a cultural touchstone that has endured for decades. The development of Final Fantasy VII began in 1994, after the release of Final Fantasy VI for the Super Nintendo. Initially, Square planned to release the game for the Nintendo 64. However, the limitations of the N64's cartridge system, particularly in terms of storage capacity, led the company to shift development to Sony's PlayStation, which offered the space required for the game's expansive world and cinematic cutscenes, thanks to the CD-ROM format. This decision played a pivotal role in shaping the game's future, both in terms of its technical achievements and its eventual impact on Sony's dominance in the console market. Development wasn't without its challenges. Moving to 3D for the first time in the Final Fantasy series posed a steep learning curve for the developers. The team at Square had to figure out how to translate the traditional turn-based mechanics into a 3D environment while maintaining the core elements that had made the series successful in the first place. The switch from 2D sprites to 3D character models and pre-rendered backgrounds required significant technical innovation, which Square's team rose to the occasion to achieve. In addition to technical hurdles, the game's narrative was one of the most ambitious ever attempted in an RPG at the time. Directed by Yoshinori Kitase and written by Kazushige Nojima, Final Fantasy VII featured a complex and emotionally charged story centered around themes of identity, loss, and environmentalism. And with one of the most iconic main character deaths in gaming history, the game had a bold narrative that deeply resonated with players and became one of the most iconic stories ever told in gaming history. When Final Fantasy VII was released in 1997, it was an instant commercial and critical success. It sold over 10 million copies worldwide, making it the best-selling game in the Final Fantasy series, and one of the most successful PlayStation titles of all time. The game's blend of 3D graphics, full motion video, and an epic storyline captivated players across the globe for years to come. Critics praised Final Fantasy VII for its deep, engaging gameplay, complex story, and groundbreaking use of technology. It received perfect or near-perfect scores from major gaming publications, and it went on to win multiple Game of the Year awards. Final Fantasy VII introduced millions of Western players to the JRPG genre, expanding the reach of Japanese game development far beyond its original audience. Final Fantasy VII follows the story of Cloud Strife, a former member of an elite military group known as Soldier, who was hired by the eco-terrorist group Avalanche to help fight the Shinra Electric Power Company. Shinra is draining the planet's life force, known as Mako, to fuel its energy empire, causing environmental devastation. As the game progresses, Cloud and his companions uncover a deeper and more sinister threat in the form of Sephiroth, a rogue former soldier who seeks to destroy the world by summoning the destructive force of Meteor. Cloud's journey takes players across a sprawling world, from the industrial city of Midgar to remote towns, ancient ruins, and futuristic laboratories. Along the way, he confronts his own fragmented memories, the truth about his past, and the reality of his connection to Sephiroth. The game explores complex themes, such as identity, existentialism, and the impact of corporate greed on the environment. In an iconic and shocking moment, and major spoilers ahead if you've never played Final Fantasy VII, the writers made the decision to kill off one of the main characters. This moment occurs when Sephiroth leaps from above and kills Aerith, in a heartbreaking scene that left players absolutely stunned. Her death was a bold narrative choice that underscored the game's emotional depth and solidified Sephiroth's place as one of gaming's most iconic villains. Final Fantasy VII was notable for its combination of 3D character models and pre-rendered backgrounds, which gave the game a unique look that still holds up in many ways today. The game's environments are diverse, ranging from the gritty, industrial streets of Midgar to lush forests, ancient temples, and snow-covered mountains. Each area has its own distinct feel, and the use of pre-rendered backgrounds allowed for intricate details that were not possible with real-time 3D graphics at the time. The game's dungeons and towns were designed to be both visually engaging and challenging, with puzzles, hidden items, and optional quests scattered throughout the world. The overworld map, which allowed players to travel between locations, was very expansive for its time, giving players a sense of freedom and exploration rarely seen in earlier RPGs. In terms of art style, Final Fantasy VII used a mixture of anime-inspired character design and realistic environments, which was a departure from the more cartoonish look of earlier Final Fantasy games. The game's art direction, led by Tetsuya Nomura, became iconic, influencing the design of future Final Fantasy games and many other RPGs. Due to its immense popularity and cultural significance, Final Fantasy VII was remade as part of a larger project that began with the release of Final Fantasy VII Remake in 2020. Rather than a simple graphical graphical update, the remake reimagines the story of Final Fantasy VII, expanding on the original plot and diving deeper into the characters, setting, and lore. The remake focuses on the Midgar section of the original game, but it greatly expands the narrative and world building, allowing players to experience iconic moments like the bombing of Mako Reactor 1 and the escape from Shinra Tower in far greater detail. The combat system was also overhauled, blending real-time action with strategic elements, providing a fresh experience for both new and returning players. Following the success of the remake, the second part of the project, titled Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, set to continue the story and explore the events that take place after leaving Midgar. These remakes are not just faithful recreations, they also introduce new elements, twists, and expansions to the narrative, creating a layered experience for longtime fans while offering something fresh for newcomers. Fans of Final Fantasy VII are now eagerly awaiting the third remake project, which is set to end off the series. Final Fantasy VII left a notable impact on the gaming industry. It popularized the JRPG genre in the West, and is credited with helping to establish the PlayStation as a dominant platform during the late 1990s. Its influence can be seen in countless RPGs and other genres that followed, from its cinematic presentation to its complex storytelling and character development. Pokemon Red and Blue, released for the Game Boy in 1996, and 1998 in North America and Europe, marked the beginning of one of the biggest franchises in video game history. Developed by Game Freak and published by Nintendo, the games introduced millions of players to the world of Pokemon, where they could capture, train, and battle a wide variety of creatures. The success of Pokemon Red and Blue led to a worldwide phenomenon that transcended video games and became a cultural icon even today. The development of Pokemon Red and Blue was a labor of love for the creator, Satoshi Tajiri. Tajiri was inspired by his childhood experiences of collecting insects and wanted to create a game that would allow players to experience the joy of collecting creatures. However, the development process was long and difficult, taking 6 years from concept to completion. Originally titled Capsule Monsters, the game struggled to find a publisher until Nintendo, intrigued by the concept, agreed to back the project. Game Freak, the small development team behind Pokemon, faced numerous challenges throughout the game's development. The Game Boy, though popular, was limited in terms of hardware, and fitting an entire world filled with 151 unique Pokemon onto a tiny cartridge required ingenious programming techniques. One of the game's key innovations was the ability to trade Pokemon between two Game Boys using a link cable, which encouraged interaction and cooperation between players. Despite these hurdles, the game persevered. The game's concept of gotta catch 'em all resonated deeply with players, and the ability to trade and battle Pokemon with friends became a defining feature of the franchise. Nintendo's belief in the project paid off, as Pokemon Red and Blue would go on to become two of the best-selling games of all time. When Pokemon Red and Blue were released, they were an immediate hit, quickly becoming a cultural phenomenon. The game sold over 31 million copies worldwide, making them among the best-selling video games of all time. In North America and Europe, Pokemon became a craze almost overnight, with kids trading, battling, and discussing their teams at school, while TV shows, trading cards, and toys further expanded the brand's reach. Critics praised Pokemon Red and Blue for their deep yet accessible gameplay, which combined elements of RPGs with strategy and exploration. The game's turn-based combat system, the variety of Pokemon to catch, and the ability to train and evolve them created an addictive gameplay loop that kept players coming back for more. Reviewers also appreciated the sense of adventure that came with exploring the game's world, meeting different trainers, and uncovering the mysteries behind rare Pokemon like Mewtwo. Players were enthralled by the opportunity to build their own teams of Pokemon and develop strategies based on the different types and abilities of each creature. The ability to trade and battle with friends using the Game Boy link cable was revolutionary, and it encouraged social interaction that became a key element in Pokemon's appeal. Pokemon Red and Blue take place in the Kanto region, a world inhabited by Pokemon, creatures that can be captured, trained, and battled. Players take on the role of a young trainer, whose goal is to capture as many Pokemon as possible and defeat the region's 8 gym leaders to become the Pokemon champion. Along the way, players must also thwart the plans of Team Rocket, a criminal organization that seeks to exploit Pokemon for their own gain. The game begins with the player choosing one of 3 starter Pokemon, Bulbasaur, Charmander, or Squirtle. From there, the player embarks on a journey across the Kanto region, catching Pokemon, battling other trainers, and uncovering the secrets of the legendary Pokemon Mewtwo. The overarching goal is to defeat the Elite Four and the current champion to claim the title of Pokemon Champion. Despite this relatively simple plot, Pokemon Red and Blue captivated players with their world building and sense of adventure. The idea of capturing and training creatures, coupled with the strategic elements of type advantages and evolving your Pokemon, gave the games depth that kept players engaged for hours on end. The world of Kanto is divided into various towns, cities, and routes, each home to different types of Pokemon and challenges. The game's level design encourages exploration, with hidden areas, caves, and rare Pokemon to discover. From the sprawling Viridian Forest to the depths of Victory Road, each area is filled with trainers to battle, items to collect, and Pokemon to catch. The art style of Pokemon Red and Blue is simple simple yet iconic. The sprite-based graphics were a product of the Game Boy's limited hardware, but they became instantly recognizable. The Pokemon design struck a perfect balance between cute and cool, helping them appeal to a broad audience. Even though the graphics are basic by today's standards, they have a charm that many players still find endearing. The music became another essential element of the game's atmosphere. From the upbeat tunes of Pallet Town to the eerie theme of Lavender Town, the soundtrack of Pokemon Red and Blue is instantly nostalgic for anyone who played the original games. Pokemon Red and Blue did more than just create a successful video game. They launched a multi-billion-dollar franchise that would dominate pop culture for decades. The success of the games was followed by the release of Pokemon Yellow, which added Pikachu as a starter, and further expanded the player's connection with the franchise. Soon after, the Pokemon anime debuted, introducing audiences around the world to Ash, Pikachu, and the world of Pokemon. The trading card game, which allowed players to collect and battle Pokemon cards, became yet again another massive success, with kids trading and playing cards at school, while Pokemon toys, movies, and merchandise further cemented the brand's place in pop culture. To this day, Pokemon remains one of the highest grossing franchises in the world. The legacy of Pokemon Red and Blue is undeniable. They introduced the world to the concept of collecting, trading, and battling creatures, creating a social and competitive experience that resonated deeply with players. These games laid the foundation for an entire franchise that spans video games, anime, trading cards, toys, movies, and more. Donkey Kong Country, released in 1994 for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, was a groundbreaking platformer that pushed the limits of the 16-bit era. Developed by Rare and published by Nintendo, the game revitalized the Donkey Kong franchise and introduced players to a new, more adventurous side of the iconic ape. With its revolutionary pre-rendered graphics, tight platforming gameplay, and memorable soundtrack, Donkey Kong Country became a defining title of the SNES era and remains one of the most beloved platformers of all time. The development of Donkey Kong Country was a collaborative effort between the British developer Rare and Nintendo, with Rare handling most of the programming, design, and artwork. At the time, Rare had developed a reputation for making impressive 8-bit games for the NES, but the studio was relatively small and unknown compared to industry giants like Nintendo. Nintendo took a gamble on Rare, giving the studio access to the Donkey Kong IP for a new project. Rare wanted to create something that would stand out from the competition, so they used Silicon Graphics workstations to create 3D models, which were then rendered into 2D sprites for the game. This technique, known as pre-rendered graphics, gave Donkey Kong Country an unprecedented level of detail and realism for a 16-bit game. The process was both time-consuming and resource-intensive, but the end result was visually stunning. One of the challenges Rare faced was ensuring the gameplay lived up to the visuals. The team worked hard to create a smooth and responsive platforming experience, taking inspiration from the tight controls of Nintendo's Super Mario games. The combination of innovative graphics and refined gameplay paid off, and Donkey Kong Country became one of the standout titles of the SNES era. When Donkey Kong Country was released in November 1994, it was an instant hit, both critically and commercially. The game sold over 9 million copies worldwide, making it one of the best-selling games for the SNES. Its success was a major boost for Nintendo, helping the company compete with the Sega Genesis and other consoles during the height of the 16-bit console wars. Critics praised Donkey Kong Country for its groundbreaking visuals, catchy soundtrack, and tight platforming gameplay. The game's level design, which mixed challenging platforming sections with exploration and hidden bonus areas, kept players engaged and coming back for more. Reviewers also appreciated the two-character system, where players could switch between Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong, each with their own unique abilities. The game's cooperative multiplayer mode, where two players could work together, added to its appeal. Players were blown away by the game's graphics, which were unlike anything they had seen before on the SNES. The use of pre-rendered sprites gave Donkey Kong Country a 3D look that stood out from other 2D platformers of the time. The soundtrack, composed by David Wise, was another highlight, with tracks like Aquatic Ambience and Jungle Groove becoming iconic pieces of video game music. Donkey Kong Country tells a simple but charming story. Donkey Kong and his nephew Diddy Kong set out on a quest to recover their stolen banana hoard, which has been taken by the villainous King K. Rool and his army of Kremlings. The game takes players through a variety of environments, from lush jungles and treacherous mines to underwater caverns and snowy mountaintops, as Donkey and Diddy Kong battle their way to King K. Rool's pirate ship for the final showdown. Though the plot is straightforward, it provides the perfect backdrop for the game's varied and challenging levels. Each environment is filled with enemies, obstacles, and hidden secrets, keeping players engaged as they make their way toward King K. Rool's lair. The level design in Donkey Kong Country is one of the game's greatest strengths. The game features a variety of different worlds, each with its own theme and unique set of challenges. From the dense jungles of the opening levels to the icy cliffs of Gorilla Glacier, each level feels distinct and visually engaging. The levels are filled with hidden bonus areas and collectibles, rewarding players for exploration and replayability. In addition to the tight platforming, Donkey Kong Country introduced unique gameplay elements like riding animal buddies, such as Rambi the Rhino and On Guard the Swordfish, which gave players new ways to traverse levels. These elements, combined with the smooth controls, made for a dynamic and fun platforming experience. The pre-rendered graphics, as mentioned earlier, were revolutionary for their time, time. The game's art style struck a balance between cartoonish and realistic, giving the characters' environments a depth and texture that was rare in 16-bit games. The backgrounds were richly detailed, and the animations of Donkey and Diddy Kong were fluid and expressive. Following the success of Donkey Kong Country, Rare developed 2 direct sequels for the SNES, Donkey Kong Country 2 Diddy Kong's Quest, and Donkey Kong Country 3 Dixie Kong's Double Trouble. Both sequels built on the original game's formula, introducing new characters, levels, and gameplay mechanics. Donkey Kong Country 2 is often considered one of the best platformers of all time, thanks to its challenging level design and expanded gameplay. After Rare's acquisition by Microsoft in 2002, the Donkey Kong series lay dormant for a few years, but it was eventually revived by Retro Studios, with Donkey Kong Country Returns for the Wii in 2010. Donkey Kong Country Returns was a reboot of the original trilogy and brought back the classic side-scrolling platforming that fans loved, with updated graphics, new mechanics, and motion controls. The game was a commercial and critical success, breathing new life into the franchise and reintroducing Donkey Kong to a new generation of players. Retro Studios followed up with Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze for the Wii U in 2014, which was later ported to the Nintendo Switch, which further refined the series' platforming mechanics while introducing new features, such as dynamic level environments and cooperative play with additional characters like Cranky Kong. Both Returns and Tropical Freeze were praised for their challenging gameplay, creative level design, and maintaining the spirit of the original Donkey Kong Country games. The legacy of Donkey Kong Country is undeniable. It helped define the platforming genre in the 16-bit era and demonstrated the potential of pre-rendered graphics to create visually stunning games. Its innovative gameplay, memorable music, and tight controls set a high bar for future platformers. The game's success also revitalized the Donkey Kong franchise, transforming Donkey Kong from a secondary character to a leading figure in Nintendo's lineup. Crash Bandicoot, released in 1996 for the Sony PlayStation, quickly became one of the most iconic platformers of the 1990s. Developed by Naughty Dog and published by Sony, the game introduced players to Crash, a wacky orange marsupial with a love for jumping, spinning, and smashing crates. As Sony's answer to Nintendo's Mario and Sega's Sonic the Hedgehog, Crash Bandicoot was a critical and commercial success, helping to define the PlayStation as a major competitor in the console market and cementing Crash as a mascot for the platform. Development of Crash Bandicoot began in 1994 under the codename Sonic's Ass Game, a tongue-in-cheek reference to the idea that players would spend most of the game staring at the back of the main character as he ran forward. Developers Andy Gavin and Jason Rubin wanted to create a 3D platformer that would capture the charm and fun of classic 2D platformers, like Super Mario and Sonic, but with a new twist, fully 3D environments. The development team faced several challenges, especially in creating a 3D platformer that would work well within the limits of the PlayStation hardware. With the camera placed behind Crash in most levels, Naughty Dog had to innovate to ensure smooth performance and fluid animations, all while fitting the game's colorful, detailed environments onto the relatively small space of a PlayStation CD. One of the biggest challenges was creating the fluid, cartoon-like animations for Crash, which were key to the game's playful and energetic tone. To achieve this, the team used cutting-edge techniques for the time, developing a custom engine to handle Crash's movements and the dynamic environments. The game also introduced a unique save system, where players had to find bonus rounds to save their progress, a mechanic that added extra challenge and replayability. Naughty Dog worked closely with Sony throughout the game's development, as Sony saw the potential for Crash Bandicoot to become their answer to Nintendo's Mario and Sega's Sonic. With a heavy marketing push and a character design to appeal to both kids and teens, Crash Bandicoot was positioned as the new face of PlayStation. Upon its release in September 1996, Crash Bandicoot was a huge success. It quickly became one of the best-selling games for the PlayStation, moving over 6 million units worldwide. The game's tight platforming mechanics, colorful visuals, and quirky humor made it a hit with players of all ages. Its success helped solidify Sony's PlayStation in the gaming industry. The game was praised for its innovative 3D environments, fluid controls, and charming characters. The level design, which alternated between forward-scrolling stages and side-scrolling platforming, and unique chase sequences, was seen as a fresh take on the traditional platformer formula. While some reviewers noted the game's difficulty and somewhat linear nature, Crash Bandicoot was largely celebrated for pushing the boundaries of what the PlayStation could achieve. Crash Bandicoot tells the story of Crash, a genetically enhanced Bandicoot who was created by the evil Dr. Neocortex and his henchman Dr. Embryo. After escaping from Cortex's laboratory, Crash sets out on a mission to rescue his girlfriend from the clutches of the villainous Doctor. Along the way, Crash travels across various islands, battling Cortex's minions, avoiding traps, and smashing crates filled with Wumpa fruit. The plot of Crash Bandicoot is relatively simple, but it serves as a fun and lighthearted backdrop for the game's fast-paced platforming action. Fans love the game's quirky characters, and the charming story and humor that appealed to both younger and older players. Crash Bandicoot was known for its unique approach to 3D platforming. Rather than offering fully open worlds like Super Mario 64, Crash Bandicoot featured linear levels that combined 3D movement with the tight precision of 2D platformers. This hybrid design allowed the game to focus on obstacle dodging, precise jumps and quick reflexes, while still taking advantage of the PlayStation's 3D capabilities. The art style of Crash Bandicoot was also one of its standout features. The game's bright, colorful environments were inspired by tropical islands, ancient ruins, and hazardous factories, giving each level a distinct and memorable look. The character design, especially Crash's expressive animations, added to the game's playful and cartoonish vibe, making it visually appealing to a wide audience. The music, composed by Josh Mansell, complemented the game's quirky tone perfectly, with upbeat and catchy tunes that matched the rhythm of the gameplay. The soundtrack of Crash Bandicoot became an integral part of its charm. Following the success of the original Crash Bandicoot, Naughty Dog developed 2 direct sequels for the PlayStation, Crash Bandicoot 2 Cortex Strikes Back and Crash Bandicoot Warped. Both games expanded on the original's formula, with improved controls, more varied environments, and new gameplay mechanics, such as riding vehicles and time traveling through different eras. Crash Bandicoot 2 introduced a hub world where players could access different levels, while Warped added even more variety with unique levels like underwater stages, motorbike races, and aerial combat. Both sequels were critically acclaimed. After Naughty Dog moved on from the series, the Crash Bandicoot franchise saw numerous spin-offs and entries developed by other studios, including Crash Team Racing in 1999 and Crash Bash from 2000, a party game. However, as the series continued through the 2000s, its popularity began to decline, with later titles like Crash Twinsanity and Crash of the Titans receiving mixed reviews. In 2017, Crash Bandicoot experienced a resurgence with the release of Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy, a remastered collection of the original 3 games for modern consoles. Developed by Vicarious Visions, the trilogy featured updated graphics, smoother controls, and additional content, introducing a new generation of players to the classic platformers, while giving longtime fans a chance to relive Crash's greatest adventures. The remaster was a commercial success, leading to the release of Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled in 2019, a remaster of the original kart racer. Despite this renewed interest, the Crash Bandicoot series has not regained the widespread popularity it enjoyed in the late 90s. While the franchise still has a dedicated fan base, it struggles to compete with more modern platformers and larger gaming franchises. In 2020, Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time was released, serving as a direct sequel to Warped, and returning to the franchise's roots with classic platforming action. Although it was well received, the game didn't reach the same heights of popularity as the original trilogy, reflecting the series' more niche status in today's gaming landscape. While Crash Bandicoot may no longer dominate the gaming scene as it once did, its influence on the platforming genre and its place in gaming history remains secure. For many players, the original Crash Bandicoot trilogy represents a nostalgic reminder of the early days of 3D gaming and the fun, challenging platformers that defined the era. When Sonic the Hedgehog was released for the Sega Genesis, it became an instant classic and helped define the platforming genre during the 16-bit era. Developed by Sonic Team and published by Sega, Sonic the Hedgehog introduced the world to a blue, spiky mascot who could run at blistering speeds. Designed to be Sega's answer to Nintendo's Mario, Sonic became a household name and propelled Sega to the forefront of the console wars of the early 1990s. The game's innovative mechanics, fast-paced gameplay, and memorable character design helped establish Sonic as one of the most iconic gaming franchises of all time. The development of Sonic the Hedgehog began in 1990, when Sega tasked a small team at Sonic Team, led by Yuji Naka and Naoto Oshima, with creating a new mascot character that could compete with Nintendo's Mario. Sega wanted a game that would showcase the power of the Genesis hardware while appealing to both children and teenagers. After experimenting with several different character designs, including an armadillo and a rabbit, the team settled on a blue hedgehog named Sonic, whose design was inspired by a combination of American pop culture and Japanese anime. The key innovation of Sonic the Hedgehog was its emphasis on speed. Unlike Mario's more methodical platforming style, Sonic was designed to race through levels at breakneck speeds, using the Genesis hardware's ability to scroll quickly and smoothly. However, balancing the game's speed with precise platforming proved to be a major challenge for the development team. They needed to ensure that players could maintain control of Sonic even when moving at high speeds, which led to the introduction of physics-based mechanics like loops, slopes, and momentum-based movement. Despite these challenges, Sonic Team succeeded in creating a game that felt both fast and responsive, with levels that encouraged exploration while rewarding players for mastering the game's speed mechanics. Sonic the Hedgehog released in June 1991. It was a massive success. The game sold over 15 million copies worldwide, becoming the best-selling title for the Sega Genesis, and solidifying Sonic's place as Sega's flagship character. Sonic the Hedgehog's success helped Sega compete directly with Nintendo during the early 1990s, and played a major role in establishing the Genesis as a legitimate competitor to the Super Nintendo. Critics praised Sonic for its fast-paced gameplay, smooth controls, and colorful visuals. The game's unique level design, which featured branching paths and hidden areas, gave it a level of depth that set it apart from other platformers of the time. Players were captivated by the sense of speed and freedom that Sonic offered, and the character's rebellious, cool attitude resonated with a younger audience. Sonic quickly became a cultural icon, with his likeness appearing on merchandise, cartoons, and even a comic book series. Sega's aggressive marketing campaign, which positioned Sonic as the edgier alternative to Mario, helped further elevate the character's popularity and personality. The story of Sonic the Hedgehog is simple but effective. Players control battle Sonic as he sets out to stop the evil Dr. Robotnik, later known as Dr. Eggman, from enslaving the animal inhabitants of South Island and turning them into robots. Dr. Robotnik has also captured the powerful Chaos Emeralds, and it's up to Sonic to stop him by racing through 6 different zones, each filled with enemies, obstacles, and hidden secrets. The game culminates in a final showdown between Sonic and Dr. Robotnik, with Sonic's speed and platforming skills put to the ultimate test. The level design of Sonic the Hedgehog was one of its most defining features. Each zone in the game was divided into 3 acts, with the final act ending in a boss battle against Dr. Robotnik. The levels were designed to take full advantage of Sonic's speed, featuring loops, ramps, and slopes that allowed players to build momentum and race through the environments at high speeds. However, the levels also featured slower, more precise platforming sections, which required players to carefully navigate hazards and enemies. The game's art style was bright, colorful, and full of personality. The environments ranged from the tropical landscapes of Green Hill Zone to the futuristic industrial settings of the later levels. The character designs, particularly Sonic himself, became instantly iconic, with Sonic's bold blue color and red shoes standing out against the vibrant backgrounds. The music of Sonic the Hedgehog, composed by Masato Nakamura of the Japanese band Dreams Come True, became another key part of the game's identity. The catchy, upbeat tracks, particularly the theme for Green Hill Zone, are still remembered fondly by fans and have been remixed in numerous Sonic games and projects over the years. The success of Sonic the Hedgehog led to the release of several direct sequels, most notably Sonic the Hedgehog 2 from 1992, which introduced Sonic's sidekick Tails and expanded upon the original formula with larger levels, Sonic 3 and Knuckles from 1994, which added the character Knuckles the Echidna and continued to refine the platforming formula with new power-ups, transformations, and more expansive levels. As the series moved into 3D with games like Sonic Adventure in 1998 for the Sega Dreamcast, Sonic's transition to three-dimensional gameplay was met with both praise and criticism. Subsequent 3D Sonic titles such as Sonic Heroes and Sonic the Hedgehog from 2006 were heavily criticized for their inconsistent quality, poor controls, and rushed development. The infamous Sonic 2006 reboot in particular became a symbol of the franchise's struggles in the 3D era. In recent years, the Sonic series has experienced something of a resurgence with titles like Sonic Generations and Sonic Mania. However, the Sonic franchise continues to be a controversial IP in modern gaming history. Despite the success of Sonic Mania, other modern titles like Sonic Forces failed to capture the same magic, receiving mixed to negative reviews due to lackluster level design and inconsistent gameplay. In addition to the game, Sonic the Hedgehog made the leap to the big screen with the release of the Sonic the Hedgehog movie in 2020, starring Ben Schwartz as the voice of Sonic and Jim Carrey as Dr. Robotnik. Despite initial backlash over Sonic's original design, which led to a major redesign after the fan outcry, the movie was a commercial success, grossing over $300 million worldwide. This success led to a sequel, Sonic the Hedgehog 2, released in 2022, which introduced Tails and Knuckles and expanded on the Sonic cinematic universe. These movies helped reignite mainstream interest in the Sonic franchise, proving that the character still has a broad appeal even beyond video games. The films were well received by fans and general audiences, and a third movie is already in development. On the gaming side, the most recent title, Sonic Frontiers, released in 2022, attempted to push the series in a new direction, with open-world exploration and more fluid 3D movement. While the game was met with cautious optimism, reviews have been mixed, with some praising its ambition, but criticizing its execution and technical shortcomings. The Sonic series continues to evolve, with each new release stirring debates among fans and critics alike. While not as universally beloved or consistently successful as it once was, the Sonic franchise continues to leave its mark on gaming and entertainment. Super Mario World, released in 1990 for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, is widely regarded as one of the best platformers ever made. Developed by Nintendo's legendary EAD team and directed by Shigeru Miyamoto, the game served as a launch title for the SNES, and was the fourth main installment in the Super Mario series. With its expansive levels, vibrant visuals, and tight controls, along with the introduction of Yoshi, Super Mario World became a defining title of the 16-bit era and one of the best-selling games of all time. Development of Super Mario World began in 1988, shortly after the release of Super Mario Bros. 3. With the launch of the SNES on the horizon, Nintendo sought to create a game that would showcase the power of the new console and build on the success of Super Mario Bros. 3. The development team wanted to push the boundaries of what a 2D platformer could achieve, incorporating larger, more complex levels, new mechanics, and improved visuals. One of the biggest challenges the team faced was adapting Mario's gameplay to the new hardware while maintaining the simplicity and fun of the earlier games. The SNES allowed for more detailed sprites and larger environments, but the team had to ensure that these new elements didn't overwhelm players or end up detracting from the core platform experience. The introduction of Yoshi, Mario's dinosaur companion, also posed unique design challenges, as the developers needed to balance Yoshi's abilities with Mario's traditional mechanics. One can't be more important than the other. Despite these challenges, the development team succeeded in creating a game that felt fresh and expansive while staying true to the core elements that had made the Super Mario series a global phenomenon. Upon its release, Super Mario World was an immediate success. The game sold over 20 million copies worldwide, making it the best-selling title for the SNES and one of the best-selling video games of all time. Its success helped solidify the SNES's position as the dominant console of the 16-bit era. Super Mario World was praised for its expansive level design, colorful graphics, and the introduction of new mechanics like Yoshi, which added a new layer of depth to the platforming gameplay. The game's controls were tight for the time, which allowed for precision platforming and gave players the freedom to explore each level in their own way. The game's use of a world map, where players could choose their own path and uncover hidden levels, was another standout feature that added replayability and depth. Players loved the sense of discovery and adventure that Super Mario World provided. From the moment players stepped into the lush world of Dinosaur Land, they were treated to a wide variety of environments, challenges, and secrets. The game's balance of accessibility and challenge made it a hit with players of all ages. The story of Super Mario World is classic Mario fare. Mario, Luigi, and Princess Peach travel to Dinosaur Land for a vacation, but their peaceful retreat is interrupted when Princess Peach is kidnapped by Bowser. Mario and Luigi set out on a quest to rescue her, traveling through the various regions of Dinosaur Land and battling Bowser's minions along the way. The game takes players through 7 different worlds, each filled with unique levels, enemies, and obstacles. From the tropical forests of the Donut Plains to the treacherous caves of Chocolate Island, players must navigate a wide variety of environments as they work their way toward Bowser's castle for the final showdown. The plot is simple like most Mario games, but provides a fun and lighthearted backdrop for the game. The level design in Super Mario World is one of its greatest strengths. The game features over 70 levels spread across multiple worlds, with each level offering its own set of challenges and surprises. In Super Mario World, you'll explore underwater stages, and even ghost houses filled with puzzles. The game also introduced the concept of branching paths, where players could unlock secret exits and discover hidden levels. The introduction of Yoshi further expanded the game's level design, allowing players to use Yoshi's abilities to interact with the environments in new ways. Whether that's eating enemies, stomping on dangerous spikes, or reaching high platforms, Yoshi became an integral part of Super Mario World's level design. Visually, Super Mario World was a stunning achievement for the SNES. The game's use of bright, bold colors and detailed sprites gave each level a unique personality, and when looking back on these levels for players, gives that nostalgic feel. The smooth animations help bring the characters' and environments to life. The game's visual style was more vibrant and expressive than its NES predecessors. The soundtrack, composed by Koji Kondo, is another highlight of Super Mario World. From the cheerful main theme to the eerie atmospheric music of the ghost houses, the game's music perfectly complements the tone and feel of each level. Since its original release on the SNES in 1990, Super Mario World has been re-released and remastered on several platforms, ensuring that new generations of players can experience its magic. The game's timeless design and broad appeal have made it one of the most frequently re-released titles in Nintendo's catalog. The first major re-release came in 2001 with Super Mario World Super Mario Advance 2 for the Game Boy Advance. This version included several updates and enhancements, such as new sound effects, additional voice clips from Charles Martinet as Mario, and the ability to play as Luigi with its own unique physics. Super Mario Advance 2 also added a save feature and tweaked some of the game's level design, making it a fresh take on a classic, and the added benefit of it being portable for players. In 2007, Super Mario World became available as a digital download in the Wii Virtual Console. This re-release preserved the original SNES version, allowing players to experience the game as it was originally designed, but with the added convenience of playing it on modern hardware. It was later re-released on the Wii U and Nintendo 3DS Virtual Consoles, giving players multiple platforms to enjoy the game. With the launch of the Super Nintendo Classic Edition in 2007, Super Mario World once again became available as part of a curated collection of classic SNES titles. This mini console featured a faithful recreation of the game, allowing players to relive the original experience on modern TVs with HDMI output. The inclusion of save states made it easier for players to tackle difficult levels, adding accessibility to the experience. In 2019, Super Mario World was included in the SNES library on the Nintendo Switch Online service. This version allows players to enjoy the game with modern features like online play, save states, and rewind functionality, making it more accessible to modern players while preserving the original gameplay. Following the success of Super Mario World, Nintendo released a direct sequel in 1995, titled Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island. Rather than continuing Mario's journey, Yoshi's Island shifted the focus to Yoshi, who must protect baby Mario and escort him across a series of levels to reunite him with baby Luigi, who has been kidnapped by the villainous Kamek. Yoshi's Island was a bold departure from the original game, with a hand-drawn, crayon-like art style that set it apart from previous Mario games. The game introduced new mechanics, such as Yoshi's ability to throw eggs, and featured large, non-linear levels, filled with puzzles and secrets. While Yoshi's Island was technically a sequel to Super Mario World, its unique visual style and gameplay mechanics made it feel like a fresh, standalone entry in the Mario series. Despite being different from its predecessor, Yoshi's Island was a critical and commercial success, praised for creative level design, innovative mechanics, and a charming art style. It further cemented Yoshi's place as a beloved character in the Mario universe, and remains a fan favorite to this day. The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past was released for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System in 1991. 1991, and 1992 in North America and Europe, and it is often regarded as one of the greatest action-adventure games of all time. Developed by Nintendo under the direction of Shigeru Miyamoto, the game brought the Zelda series back to its top-down roots after the side-scrolling approach of Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link. With its expansive overworld, complex dungeons, and innovative use of parallel worlds, A Link to the Past set the standard for the series and influenced countless action-adventure games that followed. The development of A Link to the Past began in 1988, after the success of the original Legend of Zelda on the NES. Nintendo's goal was to create a game that would push the boundaries of what was possible on the SNES, while taking advantage of the new hardware to offer larger worlds, more detailed graphics, and more complex gameplay mechanics. The team wanted to return to the top-down perspective of the first Zelda game, but with significant enhancements. One of the key innovations of A Link to the Past was the introduction of a dual-world mechanic. Players would travel between the light world and the dark world, with changes in one world affecting the other. This mechanic added depth to the exploration and puzzle solving, as players needed to think about how their actions in one world could alter the landscape in another. Balancing the two worlds and ensuring that they worked together in a cohesive way was a challenge for the development team, but it ultimately became one of the game's defining features. Another challenge was creating a game that would appeal to both seasoned Zelda players and newcomers. To achieve this, Nintendo focused on refining the core gameplay loop, exploration, dungeon crawling, and combat, while introducing new mechanics, like the Master Sword and the ability to collect items and weapons to solve puzzles. The result was a game that was both accessible and deeply rewarding. When A Link to the Past released, it was an instant success. The game sold over 4 million copies worldwide and received near universal acclaim for its innovative gameplay, captivating world, and engaging story. The game was praised for its tight controls, intricate dungeon design, and the clever use of the dual-world mechanic, which added layers of depth to the exploration. Players were drawn to the game's expansive overworld, which encouraged exploration and rewarded curiosity. The dungeons, each with their own unique themes and challenges, became a hallmark of the Zelda series, with bosses, puzzles, and secret areas that required both skill and thought to overcome. The game's non-linear structure, which allowed players to tackle some dungeons in different orders, further enhanced the feeling of freedom and adventure. In A Link to the Past, players take on the role of Link, a young boy who is called upon to rescue Princess Zelda from the evil wizard Aghanim. Aghanim has taken control of Hyrule, banishing the 7 sages of the Dark World in order to break the seal on the evil sorcerer Ganon. Link must travel between the light and the dark world to defeat Aghanim, rescue the sages, and stop Ganon from conquering both realms. The story of A Link to the Past introduces many elements that have become central to the Zelda formula, including the Master Sword, which Link must obtain to defeat Aghanim and Ganon. Along the way, players explore the vast kingdom of Hyrule, uncovering ancient secrets, solving puzzles, and battling fierce enemies in both the light world and the dark world. The narrative is simple yet effective. The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past features some of the most memorable level design in gaming history. Each dungeon is a carefully crafted puzzle filled with enemies, traps, and hidden secrets. Every dungeon offers a unique challenge, and players must use the items they collect throughout the game, such as the hookshot, fire rod, and mirror shield, to progress. The game's overworld is vast and intricately designed, with secrets hidden around every corner. And visually, A Link to the Past took full advantage of the SNES's capabilities. The game's colorful, detailed sprites, atmospheric lighting, and expressive animations help bring the world of Hyrule to life. The game's art style, which blends a cartoony aesthetic with more realistic environments, has aged remarkably well, and it remains one of the most visually appealing games from the 16-bit era. Koji Kondo's music for A Link to the Past is equally iconic, with themes like the overworld theme in Hyrule Castle still considered to be one of the best themes in video game history. The soundtrack perfectly complements the game's sense of adventure and mystery. One of the more unique pieces of A Link to the Past's history is its live service version, titled BS Zelda no Densetsu, which was released exclusively in Japan for the Satellaview, a satellite modem peripheral for the Super Famicom. Broadcast in 1995, BS Zelda was an episodic version of A Link to the Past that utilized the Satellaview's ability to transmit data in real time. The game featured voice-acted narration, unique dungeons, and new challenges that were broadcast over satellite in weekly episodes. Players experienced these live broadcasts as timed events, with each episode offering a new segment of the game to play, often with altered layouts or objectives. The inclusion of voice acting in real-time broadcasts was revolutionary at the time, creating a unique communal experience as players across Japan tune in at the same time to play the latest episode. While this version of A Link to the Past never made its way outside of Japan, it is now mostly lost to time due to the nature of its broadcast. It remains a fascinating part of the Zelda franchise's history and an early example of live service gaming. In 2013, Nintendo released The Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds for the Nintendo 3DS, a direct sequel to A Link to the Past, set in the same world as the original game. A Link Between Worlds introduced new mechanics, while paying respects to its predecessor's iconic design. The game's main innovation was the ability for Link to transform into a painting and move along walls, allowing for new puzzle-solving opportunities and greater freedom of exploration. While A Link Between Worlds closely mirrors the overworld and dungeons of A Link to the Past, it introduces a new kingdom, Lowrule, which serves as the Dark World equivalent. Players travel between Hyrule and Lowrule, using the wall merging mechanic to access previously unreachable areas and uncover new secrets. The game was met with critical acclaim for its inventive mechanics, beautiful visuals, and nostalgic connections to A Link to the Past. A Link to the Past was a largely influential title for many Zelda titles to come, and not only Zelda titles, but the entire action-adventure genre. The game has been re-released multiple times, including on the Gameboy Advance in 2002, where it included the Four Swords multiplayer mode, and on the Wii, Wii U, and 3DS Virtual Consoles. Most recently, A Link to the Past is available on the Nintendo Switch Online SNES library, allowing new generations of players to experience this iconic adventure. Banjo-Kazooie released for the Nintendo 64 in 1998. It's a beloved 3D platformer developed by Rare, a studio known for producing some of the most iconic games of the 1990s. Combining charming characters, inventive level design, and a healthy dose of humor, Banjo-Kazooie quickly became a standout title on the N64, and has remained a nostalgic favorite for fans of the era. The game's creative world, delightful characters, and addictive collectathon gameplay make it one of the most memorable platformers of this generation. The development of Banjo-Kazooie began under the codename Project Dream, which was initially planned as a pirate-themed adventure game for the Super Nintendo. However, as the development shifted to the N64, Rare reworked the concept into a 3D platformer to take advantage of the N64's hardware, which was capable of rendering expansive three-dimensional worlds. The team wanted to build on the success of Super Mario 64, but with more elaborate levels, a quirky sense of humor, and a duo of protagonists, Banjo the Bear and Kazooie the Bird. One of the main challenges during development was creating a game that balanced exploration, puzzle solving, and platforming, while providing players with a rewarding sense of progression. Rare also had to optimize the game's large, intricate levels to run smoothly on the limited hardware of the N64. The team's solution was to introduce a collectathon element, where players would gather musical notes, or jiggies, and other collectibles to unlock new areas and progress through the game. This approach encouraged exploration and made the game's environments feel alive and full of secrets. Despite the technical limitations at the time, Rare managed to create a visually stunning game with colorful, detailed worlds and expressive character animations. The game's lighthearted tone and whimsical art style added to its charm, while the dynamic soundtrack composed by Grant Kirkhope perfectly captured the playful and adventurous spirit of the game. When Banjo-Kazooie launched in 1998, it was met with widespread critical acclaim. The game sold over 3 million copies, making it one of the best-selling titles for the N64. The game was enjoyed for its inventive level design, tight platforming mechanics, and its combination of humor and charm. Many reviewers noted that Banjo-Kazooie successfully built on the foundation laid by Super Mario 64, while adding its own unique twists. The characters of Banjo and Kazooie became instant fan favorites, thanks to their witty banter and the game's humorous dialogue. Players loved exploring the game's expansive levels. The collectible-based gameplay provided a constant sense of progression, and players were motivated to return to earlier levels to uncover hidden secrets and complete objectives. The game's puzzles, boss battles, and varied environments offered a perfect blend of challenge and accessibility, making it appealing to both casual players and more dedicated platformer fans. In Banjo-Kazooie, players control Banjo the Bear, and Kazooie, his wisecracking bird companion who lives in his backpack. The game's story revolves around Banjo's quest to rescue his sister Tootie, who's been kidnapped by the evil witch Gruntilda. Gruntilda plans to steal Tootie's beauty and transfer it to herself using a magical machine. To stop Gruntilda, Banjo and Kazooie must travel through 9 expansive worlds connected via Gruntilda's lair. They must solve puzzles, defeat enemies, and collect jiggies. Along the way, they'll encounter a colorful cast of characters, including the helpful Mole Bottles, who teach Banjo and Kazooie new moves, and Mumbo Jumbo, a shaman who transforms them into various creatures to help them overcome obstacles. The level design in Banjo-Kazooie is one of its greatest strengths. Each world in the game is a self-contained sandbox, filled with puzzles, enemies, and collectibles. The levels are themed around different environments, making them all feel unique and memorable. Each world has its own distinct visual style and challenges. Rare's attention to detail is evident in every aspect of the level design. Each world is packed to the brim with secrets and hidden areas, encouraging players to explore every nook and cranny. The game's use of verticality, combined with Banjo and Kazooie's various abilities, allows for a creative platforming experience that challenges and rewards skill and curiosity. And visually, Banjo-Kazooie was a standout for its time. The game had vibrant colors, smooth animations, and expressive character design that gave it a unique charm. Following the success of Banjo-Kazooie, Rare quickly developed a sequel, Banjo-Tooie, which was released in 2000 for the N64. Banjo-Tooie expanded on the original in nearly every way, offering larger, more complex levels, new moves, and even more collectibles. The game introduced interconnected worlds and a more intricate story, making it a favorite among fans of the series. In 2003, Rare was acquired by Microsoft, a move that threw the future of the Banjo-Kazooie series into uncertainty. Following the sale, Rare shifted its focus to developing games for Microsoft's Xbox consoles, which meant that Banjo and Kazooie, once icons of the N64, 64 were no longer tied to Nintendo hardware. After a long hiatus, the series returned in 2008 with Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts for the Xbox 360. However, Nuts and Bolts was a departure from the traditional platforming gameplay of the original games. Instead, it focused on vehicle building and exploration, which did disappoint many longtime fans of the series who were hoping for a return to the classic collectathon formula. While the game received positive reviews for its creativity and innovation, it didn't achieve the same level of success or popularity as the original titles did. Since the release of Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts, the Banjo-Kazooie series has largely been dormant, with no new mainline entries in over a decade. However, the characters have maintained a presence in modern gaming through various re-releases and crossovers. In 2015, the original Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie were included in Rare Replay, a compilation of classic Rare games for the Xbox One. This allowed a new generation of players to experience the classic platformers in their original form, complete with modern enhancements like higher resolution and smoother frame rates. And in 2019, Banjo and Kazooie were added as playable characters in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, a move that delighted fans of the series and reignited interest in the characters. Their inclusion in Smash Bros. Was seen as a recognition of the series' importance to gaming history and its enduring popularity with fans. Despite the franchise's dormant status, Banjo-Kazooie remains a nostalgic favorite, and many fans still hope for a new entry in the series. As of now, the future of the franchise is uncertain, but the original games continue to be celebrated as some of the best platformers of the N64 era. Spyro the Dragon, released in 1998 for the Sony PlayStation, quickly became one of the most beloved platformers of its time. Developed by Insomniac Games and published by Sony, Spyro brought players into a vibrant world full of magic, adventure, and charm. The game's open-ended levels, smooth controls, and lovable protagonist made it an instant hit with both younger players and seasoned gamers alike. As one of the key titles in the PlayStation's golden era, Spyro the Dragon established itself as a fan favorite and helped define the 3D platforming genre. The development of Spyro the Dragon began as Insomniac Games' second project after the release of Disruptor in 1996. The studio wanted to create a game that would stand out in the growing 3D platformer market, which was being dominated by titles like Super Mario 64 and Crash Bandicoot. Led by creative director Ted Price, Insomniac set out to create a game with colorful environments, free exploration, and fluid movement that would appeal to a broad audience. One of the biggest challenges during development was making the game world feel expansive and seamless without overwhelming the PlayStation's hardware limitations. Insomniac collaborated with Mark Cerny, who helped optimize the game's engine to allow for large, open environments with minimal loading times. This technical innovation helped Spyro's world feel alive and full of adventure, setting it apart from other platformers with more confined level designs. The development team also faced the challenge of designing a character that would appeal to all ages. Spyro was initially conceived as a green dragon, but the team decided to make him purple to avoid blending in with the game's lush, grassy environments. Spyro's playful personality, combined with his abilities to glide, breathe fire, and charge at enemies, made him a fun and dynamic character to control. When Spyro the Dragon was released in September 1998, it was met with widespread acclaim. The game sold over 5 million copies worldwide, making it one of the best-selling PlayStation titles of all time. The ability to explore large, colorful worlds without strict time limits or linear paths was a refreshing change for many players and critics, giving the game a sense of freedom that resonated with both younger and older audiences. The game's visuals were also a highlight, with vibrant, detailed environments that pushed the PlayStation's graphical capabilities. Spyro's world was full of life, with rolling hills and magical castles, to various enemy creatures scattered throughout the levels. Reviewers were also impressed by the game's ability to maintain a consistent frame rate and smooth camera control, both of which were key to its enjoyable gameplay experience. The game's mix of collecting gems, freeing trapped dragons, and solving light puzzles gave players plenty to do, while the responsive controls made exploring the world a joy. The addition of side activities such as gliding to hidden areas and battling bosses added variety to the gameplay, keeping players engaged from start to finish. Spyro the Dragon takes place in the Dragon Realms, a peaceful land home to 5 distinct dragon families. The story begins when the evil Nasty Nork, a rejected creature who resents the dragons, uses dark magic to turn all the dragons into crystal statues. Spyro, a young and seemingly insignificant dragon, is the only one unaffected by Nasty's spell due to his small size. Determined to rescue his friends and defeat Nasty Nork, Spyro embarks on a quest across multiple worlds, freeing the imprisoned dragons and collecting gems along the way. Throughout his journey, Spyro must traverse different realms, each with its own unique theme, such as the Artisan's world and the Peacekeeper's world. Along the way, Spyro encounters a variety of enemies, including Nork minions and bosses, all of which he must defeat using his fire-breathing and charging abilities. The game culminates in a final showdown with Nasty Nork in his lair, where Spyro must overcome tricky platforming challenges and finally restore peace to the Dragon Realms. One of the defining features of Spyro the Dragon is its expansive and interconnected level design. Each world is a hub filled with portals to individual levels, which players can tackle in any order. This structure gives players the freedom to explore at their own pace, collecting gems, finding hidden areas, and rescuing trapped dragons. The game's levels are also designed with verticality and exploration in mind, encouraging players to use Spyro's glide ability to reach new heights and discover secrets. The soundtrack, composed by Stuart Copeland of The Police, is another standout feature. The game's music perfectly matches the adventurous spirit of the gameplay, with upbeat and atmospheric tracks that enhance each level's mood. Copeland's dynamic compositions, combined with the game's fun sound effects, create an immersive audio experience that players still fondly remember today. The success of Spyro the Dragon led to 2 direct sequels on the PlayStation, Spyro 2 Ripto's Rage and Spyro Year of the Dragon. Both games expanded on the original formula, introducing new abilities for Spyro, more complex levels, and additional characters like Hunter the Cheetah. The sequels were praised for their improvements to gameplay, including more varied objectives, mini-games, and boss battles, solidifying the Spyro trilogy as a PlayStation classic. However, after the release of Year of the Dragon, the series saw a decline. In 2002, Insomniac Games moved on from the Spyro series, and the development of future games was handed over to various other studios. These later entries, such as Spyro Enter the Dragonfly and Spyro Hero's Tale, received mixed reviews due to technical issues, uninspired gameplay, and a lack of the charm that had defined the original trilogy. In 2011, Spyro made an unexpected return as the lead character in Skylanders, Spyro's Adventure, a toys-to-life game developed by Toys for Bob. In Skylanders, players used physical toys to unlock characters and content within the game, with Spyro serving as the face of the franchise. While Skylanders was commercially successful, selling millions of toys and spawning several sequels, Spyro's role in the series was diminished as more characters were introduced. Many fans felt that the Skylanders series moved away from what made Spyro special, and over time, Spyro became more of a side character within the broader Skylanders universe. Today, Spyro the Dragon exists in a somewhat forgotten state in modern gaming history. While the character is still recognized and loved by longtime fans, the Spyro IP hasn't seen much activity beyond re-releases in the Skylanders series. After Skylanders faded in popularity, Spyro's relevance also declined, with newer generations of gamers not having the same connection to the character that older players do. In 2018, Spyro made a brief comeback with the release of the Spyro Reignited trilogy, a remastered collection of the original PlayStation trilogy developed by Toys for Bob. The remasters featured updated graphics, improved controls, and modern enhancements, while staying true to the original game's design. The Reignited trilogy was well received, especially by fans of the original games, and introduced Spyro to a new generation of players. However, despite the success of the Reignited trilogy, there have been no new Spyro games announced, and the character has largely faded into the background of modern gaming. That's all the nostalgic video games we have for you today. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to Save Point for more videos. And let us know down in the comments if there's any topics you want to see covered. We'll see you in the next one.